Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm so excited to have you all here today to partake in this important discussion, compassionate peace building and the role of youth in global solidarity and dialogue. My name's Atma Narinder, and I will be your moderator for this panel. And as someone who is very passionate about community building and peace projects, I've seen how powerful compassion can be, and it's not soft or abstract, but something very tangible and something very real and so important in today's world. It connects us all as human beings, and it helps us break down those boundaries and barriers that we've put up in between ourselves. And I think that's at the heart of the conversation that we're going to be having today with our amazing panelists. We've got today with us Sofia, Lanza, Cairo, Eubanks, and Venessa Hanson. Thank you so much for joining us today. And they're sort of proof and example of how compassion and peace building is working in today's real life world. So if I can turn it over to you guys, and if you guys could just give us a brief introduction of where you guys are in the world and how you got into peace building and how you began your journey and how compassion has led you to where you guys are. Let's start with Cairo.
How did I know that you were going to pick me first? Hello, everyone. My name is Eubanks, and I just want to start off by thanking our moderator, Atma, our conference organizers, Anna Mulla, and the entire Charter for Compassion team for this incredible opportunity to be here with all of you today to start off day 2 of the Global Youth Conference. My name is Eubanks. I'm a servant leader, executive coach, and youth advocate who believes that compassion is truly more than a feeling. It's an intention and action. For the past several years, I've been building bridges across cultures, sectors, and generations. I'm happy to share more about the work that I do, but I believe that that is a great start in terms of introducing myself, and I'm dialing in from sunny South Florida.
Thank you so much. Let's go to Sofia next.
Sorry, that was complicated. Hello. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me here. I'm really excited about this conversation. And I'm Sofia Lanza. I'm Italian. I was born and raised in Italy. And I moved to the UK about 7 years ago, where I studied in Edinburgh at university. And now I am in Switzerland doing a specialization course. I did my undergrad in Middle Eastern Studies. So I've been mostly involved in interreligious dialogue, but now I'm specializing in ecumenical dialogue, so interdenominational dialogue in Christianity. So I've done most of my work in that and peace building around community centers. Yeah, I'm really excited. So we can talk maybe more about it.
Thank you for that beautiful introduction, Sofia. And let's go to Venessa.
Thanks, Atma, and so nice to meet you, Cairo and Sofia. Of course, we had a bit of a minute backstage before, but it's so beautiful to hear you both introduce yourselves and share about what you do. Hi, everyone. My name is Venessa. I echo the thanks to the organizers for having us here, and for those of you tuning in as well, thank you so much for making the time to be here with us today. My name is Venessa. I, like Sofia, I'm also Italian. But I was born in Ghana, spent most of my life growing up in Italy. I moved to the UK similarly 7 years ago to pursue my degree in international studies with French. And my activism and peace building journey actually started while I was home in Italy, where I got super involved with a course of the DRC, which is still very much in line with what I do right now. After studying at university, I'm currently working as the social media officer for the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, which, as the name says, is this global campaign that advocates for the elimination of nuclear weapons. And a big core of the work that we do is centering the voices of affected communities and indigenous peoples. And for that reason, in 2017, we won the Nobel Peace Prize for the work that we've been doing on this, but also on an international law called the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons that passed at the UN, which is the first of its kind and which makes nuclear weapons illegal So happy to be here, super excited to speak and share more.
That's amazing. You guys have such different backgrounds, and that's such an amazing journey, Venessa, and to all be here under this sort of one umbrella about compassionate peace building. We do have one more panelist. He will be joining us very soon, so we will be looking out for him. But to get back to our topic title, compassionate peace building, maybe you guys can share how compassion has guided your journey. So maybe there's an anecdote or a story that you guys would like to share with us. Sofia, let's go for you.
I always struggle with the microphone, pardon me. So I think I'll go a long way around, but short. I'll try to be short. But I think my journey in peace building started, I think I started from a very sheltered position. I grew up in Italy, and I was kind of always the majority, both of my religious background and my ethnic background. And the people around me were mostly from my own ethnicity, my own religion, and my own background. And then I was suddenly in the UK in a very multicultural environment, which I found I struggled because I wasn't used to it. I wasn't used to learning so much about other people, but also seeing how culture, how religion affects the way that we relate to one another. And not particularly to me, but that created tensions in the community that I was in. And so I started to be really interested in how can I solve the conflict that is going on between my friends. And this type of conflict was really new to me because it was conflict that was at the very core of the identity of these people. It wasn't a conflict that you can have on a day-to-day basis. It was a conflict that really affected the essence of who these people are. And when I moved to university, I was again in this multicultural space, but on a bigger level. And I was studying Middle Eastern studies, which put me in a position where I was constantly in the middle of different activists, and somehow had to relate to activists on different ends of the spectrum all the time. And at that point, I felt like I needed to learn how to do dialogue facilitation. I was like, for myself and for the people around me, I was like, I need to learn how to have constructive dialogue. And so I started working and I started volunteering, and I got the training that I wished for. But for a long time, I think it was the training in negotiation and facilitation and interfaith dialogue and intercultural dialogue was very separate for me. Like it was something that I had a skill set that I would use that was some kind of external from me. And then I think when reacting to my own religion and to my own faith and to my own way of seeing the world, I started to realize that I needed to literally soften my heart. And I needed to learn how to let the stories that I was hearing affect me, and to even feel 1% of the suffering of the person that I was helping in this situation, in this tension, in this dialogue. And I'll never be able to understand everything, that the person shares, but that kind of compassion, that kind of trying to understand where a person comes from to a deep level has impacted my facilitation skills to so much. Like I was transformed, and it transformed the way that I worked, and it helped me so much in the way that I do my job, because most of the times I'm always looking to understand first where a person comes from, rather than just the idea that they present. So I think without it, it would be a useless job.
That's amazing. You've turned a real life example or a real life situation into your career, and you've helped sort of helped sustain that career and helped how you can make it better with the example of your friends. That's such a touching and moving story, and I think that's very important to remember, especially in this day and age, that interfaith relationships and dialogue, it's not an external part. It's very much part of life and everyday sort of examples and everyday situations that we find ourselves in. Venessa, Cairo, do you have something that you guys would like to add?
You can go ahead, Venessa, if you'd like.
No, of course. Thank you, Cairo. I really like what Sofia said about letting the human stories affect you, because at the center of the work that I do, to answer the question as well, is these human stories. That is what drives every single thing that we do, from the campaigns that we run to raise awareness on the stories, to the policy and advocacy work that we do at the UN level, at the government level, to advance work to safeguard these communities and advance social justice. We put those human stories. And I think for that reason, compassion is not just a feeling, but it's a responsibility. It's something that has to drive the work that we do, because it's super, super, super important to center at the core of everything that we do in those who are the most affected, and also those who at the grassroots level are actually leading and running and driving these movements to amplify what they are doing. So to kind of answer the question as well, I think it's a responsibility and a guiding force in the work that I do. Cairo.
I love that guiding force part. I think that's so strong. And a lot of people will resonate with that.
No, definitely. And so first of all, I'm loving everything that I'm hearing, and I'm glad to be a part of this dialogue. A bit of context from my background and to answer the question as well. For the past few years, I've been building bridges across cultures, sectors, and generations. I founded my own business, CairoSpeaks, CairoWrites, which is a consulting and program development firm focused on leadership development and strategic communication. I currently serve as the youth representative for Generations United to the United Nations, and I co-lead Together for SDGs, which is a global youth-led intergenerational initiative that's reshaping how we approach the Sustainable Development Goals. But here's what I'm most proud of. I've worked with young people in communities from South India to South Florida to Kenya and all around the world to show that when we listen first and when we lead with empathy, and I heard you sharing that as well, Sofia, the importance of empathetic communication and facilitation, and center the voices of those most effective. We're not just talking about peace, we're truly building it. So one thing that I will say is, so I thought it was interesting, Sophia, and thank you for your vulnerability in terms of sharing that there were areas that you were being challenged, right? When you were all of a sudden in a completely different culture where you were not necessarily considered the majority, there were diverse perspectives to keep in mind, and that was my experience, but from the other side. So my journey into peace building didn't start with a grand vision or a master plan. It started with something much more personal, which was recognizing my own strengths and my own struggles. Growing up as a Jamaican and Black American girl, I became very aware of the implicit biases people held about me and my people, about my cultures, about where I came from. But what struck me the most and what I thought was really interesting was realizing that these biases were not only just external, excuse me, allergies, but they were also misconceptions between the cultures I belonged to as well. So instead of letting that divide me, I decided to let that guide me. And I saw myself as a bridge, an unofficial cultural ambassador, if you will. And I realized that I could challenge those misconceptions right where I was, in my school, in my communities, with the friends I had in different circles. And in middle school and in high school, I noticed something. People who seemed so different on the surface actually had so much in common. And I found that I could bring them together. And that became my superpower. But it wasn't until after college that I really understood what compassion meant in practice. I received a fellowship to teach at a residential school for underrepresented students in South India, and I was there for several months and I witnessed something transformative: the power of storytelling, which is what Venessa was also talking about here, too. When students shared their stories, when we exchanged stories and learned about each other, barriers were able to be dissolved, common ground emerged, and cultural exchange in this instance also felt healing. That experience taught me something: that you can't just feel compassion, it's something that you practice. It's about listening. It's about seeing the humanity in everyone, even when you've been implicitly taught not to. From there, my work has evolved. I became a pageant queen and a youth representative, but more importantly, I started building bridges through my company, CairoSpeaks, CairoWrites, consulting with and collaborating with organizations and intergovernmental agencies on leadership development and youth affairs. There's so much more that I can share, but one thing that I really want to ingrain and just emphasize is compassion isn't passive, it's active. It's a choice that we make every single day to see people as whole, complex human beings worthy of dignity and respect. And that choice will continue to open doors, minds, and hearts more than we can even imagine.
Thank you so much, Cairo, for sharing your journey. It's amazing. I think something that all three of you have had in common is that sort of that one experience, not negative, but maybe resistive experience, and that's all led you onto this similar path of creating a better world for all. So I think that's very beautiful, and that leads us very nicely to our next question, which is, compassion doesn't mean that the path is easy. Unfortunately, I think sometimes it makes it much, much harder. But then how do you approach working within systems that may resist change, and what helps you stay grounded in your values? So Venessa, let's start with you first.
Of course. I think one key aspect of the work, and just not the work in general, but just of organizing and activism, has been the willingness to listen, not just hearing, but listening and understanding. And that, I think, has helped not only guide and shape solutions, but also be able to shape and write solutions that are long lasting. Because we want to build a peace that is sustainable, not something that helps solve this problem at a short term, but something that lasts in the long term. And one thing that has been helping me stay grounded in these bleak times, because especially when it comes to nuclear weapons, the atmosphere, what we are seeing is more and more governments, more and more policies turning towards nuclear weapons and towards policies that advocate for nuclear deterrence, when in reality, we have seen the consequences of these weapons. We have seen what they do in real life. And most importantly, the research and the experts do tell us that there's no way to win a nuclear war, right? And no government have the healthcare infrastructures to deal with the consequences of a nuclear war, or to deal with the consequences of a nuclear weapons use. And so why do we have these weapons in the first place? And so in times like these, when we have all these bleak things happening around us, one thing that has been helping me stay grounded is community, is moments and spaces like these, is being around other people who are also organizing and working to ultimately make the world that we live in a better place, to ultimately ensure that the next generations will not go through what we are going through. And so again, community and just being with friends, not just colleagues, but loved ones and people around you who have the same passions and the same views as you, has been quite grounded and has been helping me still carry on the fight and to not let go of the hope, because it can be very easy to lose hope, right? It's not easy. The fight for peace is not an easy one. It's a lot easier to let go. However, having people around you that help you stay grounded and that you can lean on when it gets a bit too heavy, because sometimes it can get a bit heavy, and it's okay to admit that and to work to get better, because rest in its own way is resistance as well.
I think that's amazing that you have that community system around you to help. That's very important, because I think something that we all think is that, oh, we're alone on this, no one else is going to understand. But once you open that dialogue, once you start talking to somebody, I mean, I can resonate with all three of you at this moment, and I've not had any previous conversations with you before. I think it's very natural to assume you're alone and sort of isolated, but that's why dialogue is so important, and it helps not just the cause or the movement, but I suppose your own health, your own mental health, and it makes you much more resilient. And I think one thing that you definitely need in this movement is the ability to resist, the ability to sort of stay on the course, and just strength. And that's beautiful that you have that community system around you. What about you guys? Sofia, Cairo, do you have anything to add to how you guys stay resistant?
Cairo, do you want to go first? Or?
You know what? I'm happy to go. That's no problem. I like to think of it from a coaching perspective. I have an executive coach background, and so I start to ask myself, powerful questions. So when I encounter resistance within systems or structures, my first instinct is really to get curious. I ask myself, what's driving this resistance? Is it a mind shift that's needed? Do people need a visual representation or proof of concept? Sometimes what's required is a prototype, an example that validates what's being advocated for, because it's so much harder to argue with evidence. I've also learned that you cannot change systems alone. And it's easy to feel that passion and to feel that energy and to know that you are capable of being able to make change and make a difference, to be a catalyst, but you also need help. You need strategic allies, people who understand the politics, because unfortunately there's politics in everything. People who have decision making power and who genuinely support the change, they become your bridge to the people who can actually make things happen. One of my most successful examples of this is Operation Stop Cyber Harassment, which was an annual conference. I didn't just talk about the problem of online sexual harassment and cyberbullying. What I did was I brought together law enforcement, school resource officers, mental health professionals, and leaders from the cybersecurity and IT world. When decision makers saw the diverse expertise coming together around one message, which was protecting young people online, it became impossible to ignore. And I was working with some major school districts. And last year alone, I spoke to over 3,000 parents, teens, and educators throughout Broward County and Miami-Dade County. But I also want to be really honest as well with some of these challenges and challenges that you come across, right? I couldn't sustain that level of effort indefinitely. And that is something that I had a really hard time grappling with. And that's what I want to be honest about, is that I was running Operation Stop Cyber Harassment as an annual conference while simultaneously serving as the co-chair of the Intergenerational and Youth Subcommittee for the 2024 United Nations Civil Society Conference in Nairobi. I was juggling multiple initiatives and I was burning out. And I realized that burnout is not a badge of honor. It is a warning sign. So I made a strategic decision. I streamlined my focuses to three core areas, which are youth empowerment, women's economic empowerment, and community development on local and global levels. So this is something that you have to also ask yourself. Do you have the passion for it, but also do you have the bandwidth? Are you able to see this through? And if you aren't in this particular moment, what can you do to streamline those efforts so that way you can still make sure that a cause that you care about is being amplified, but it may not necessarily be the main focus that you're working on at this moment. So I also will say that sometimes when you deal with that resistance, you have to be honest with yourself, and you also have to sometimes be willing to pivot if you need to, so that you can focus on the areas that are really a part of your expertise or part of the work that you've been doing, all of these years.
That's such an important message, is that if you don't have energy for all of your causes, streamline on the one that you want to focus on the most, especially because you are going to come up against that resistance that we've been talking about. And there are unfortunately some players that don't want change, and to fight against that, you need to be so energetic and you need to be very strong to fight against that. So I think that's a very important piece of information, especially for newcomers, is to streamline and to just focus on sort of your where you want to focus on. Sofia, do you have anything to add before we introduce Abdul to our conversation?
I just wanted to say that I really agree with Cairo, and I would approach the question kind of in a different sense, in the sense that because I work in interfaith, and particularly with religious groups and religious structures and religious systems, I had to deal mostly with the fact that many religious groups, including my own, sometimes resist this kind of dialogue, and so many times I had to kind of focus. Okay, this is what I want. This is what I need the communities to do, which is meet up, which is dialogue, which is eat a meal together. And then trying to understand how I can convince them all and kind of understand their fears. Usually, systems are really hard to get around, and I don't feel I have alone the power to get a hold of that. But I have the power to have one-on-one conversations. And so many times when in community building projects that I've done, encountered this resistance, I would usually, just very simply trying to have a conversation with the main person that was resisting me and understand, why are they coming like this? What's their fear? What are they fearing in this kind of peace dialogue, peace building, that will affect them? And so I think in that sense, it was really useful for me to understand what are their deepest needs and trying to meet them so that the peace building process can keep going.
That's so nice. So you're essentially sort of reaching out before it turns into a problem or before they start resisting you. And that's very important as well. If you're able to do that, to sort of bypass the resistance and hit it sort of head on, that's an amazing thing to do. And I think that brings us very nicely to our next topic, which is dialogue. And you've sort of started off that topic so nicely. But just before we take any other questions, I just want to see if Abdul is with us. Hi, Abdul. I think he might still be having some mic trouble, so we'll let him. Maybe he can chime in later when his mic is working. But yeah, so our third question is intercultural and interfaith dialogue. They're powerful peace building tools, and what lessons have you learned about engaging meaningfully across worldwide? So who wants to begin? Cairo, would you like to start?
Sure, and I'm happy to share from my experiences starting off even in college. So my first world religions class in college, it completely shifted how I see the world. I discovered something that fundamentally changed my approach to dialogue, that nearly every major religion, whether it's Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, and so many others, share universal principles. They all emphasize being a good person. They all value personal growth and self improvement. And they all teach the importance of giving back to your community, of supporting your fellow human being. When you see those commonalities, you realize something profound. Beneath the surface differences, we're all seeking the same things. We're all asking similar questions about how to live a meaningful life and how to contribute to something larger than ourselves. That realization became the foundation for how I engage across worldviews. I've worked in intercultural and interfaith spaces, and I've learned that acknowledging cultural traditions isn't just respectful, it's truly essential. It's about using unifying language. So, for example, instead of using the word God, right, I might use the word creator to honor different faith traditions.
Wow.
It's, just being aware of prayer times, religious
That's so
holidays,
beautiful.
and the rhythms that matter to many different communities as well.
That's such a thoughtful touch, and that in itself was going to mitigate some of the sort of negativity that you're going to get going forward. So that's such an amazing point for our listeners and for our audience to take away. Venessa, what would you like to add?
I think Cairo put it beautifully when when she highlighted the importance of being mindful of even the little things such as language and change and that, especially when we're trying to be accommodating of people from all walks of life and from all different faiths. So I don't think there's much that I'd add on this. I think she put it brilliantly.
I agree. I agree. Sophia, do you agree with us, or would you like to add something?
No, I don't. Yeah, of course I do agree with you. No, yeah, I think what I learned the most is that asking doesn't hurt. If you ask respectfully something, it will be unlikely that it will hurt. And I learned it kind of the hard way, because at the beginning of my interfaith facilitation job, I was really scared. I was really scared of offending, and I was trying to be mindful. And at the same time, I was like, okay, I'm not going to ask that about their practice, because I'm scared of offending by asking. And actually, what I found is that it's really it makes people feel really seen when you ask, of course, in a respectful way, and it breaks the ice most of the time. And it's such a good learning opportunity. And so I think one of the things that I've learned the most is that if I have a doubt, and encouraging people that are part of these interreligious settings to ask questions to one another, to be interested in learning more of what are the practices that each religion have or each culture have. So I think that is one of the best things that I've learned in interreligious dialogue, is just asking is, it doesn't cost you much, of course, respectfully. And people are always very happy to share what they care about.
That's such a nice point. Again, one of the groups of people that I've had most sort of, not issues, but trouble sort of understanding is probably intergenerational community. So communities where they're not necessarily liking the viewpoint of the young or the youth. But I think that's really amazing, Sofia, to reach out to them and to listen to what they have to say. And I think that, again, it's very important so that everyone's on the same wavelength. Because ultimately it is all for the same cause. We all just want peace in the world, or in our communities, or in our faith groups. It is just all for the same cause. So again, that's a very important question, just to reach out to them and to ask them what their feelings are.
Can I add something else?
Yes, go for it.
One of the programs that I started was putting together very elderly people that were usually isolated with young people that were also isolated. One of the main issues of extremism is isolation of the youth. And one of the main issues of why we keep having issues with breaking down systematic discrimination is the isolation of the elderly. And so the program that I started was to match these two people, and we would have a very nice old Christian man with a very young Muslim man that were going out for coffee, and they have learned so much about each other, and that was so striking to me, because I was like, right, they're never gonna bond, and actually it worked out really well. And the data that we got after that was that there was a lot of improvement, both in what they felt about each other religiously in interfaith dialogue, but also mostly personal. They felt connected. They felt like they could go out in their community. And yeah, sorry, I wanted to share that because
thank you so much. That's such a beautiful story to share.
Our programs sometimes are very isolated, so it's really nice.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I love that. Thank you. I think it showed human connection, which leads us back to compassion, which is what this is all about. If you can sort of connect with somebody on that human level, you will be sort of dissolving those boundaries and those borders that we've put up in between ourselves. And I think that that's a beautiful way of dissolving them. I've forgotten what the next question is. Let me just check my notes. Okay, so young people, coming back to young people. So obviously we want more young people to step up into this important role, and a lot more young people want to come up into this sector, but they don't necessarily always have the confidence or the right support system around them to come into this space. I know I struggled a lot when I first came into this sector, and you guys have all spoken about your journeys. So moving forward, from your perspective, what support or changes could help more young people feel empowered to engage in peace and dialogue initiatives? Venessa, how about yourself?
Happy to start. I think young people are already leading these spaces and these conversations, and we see that on so many aspects and in so many fronts, from grassroots organizing to leading policy work with governments and institutions. What young people need is resources to continue with the work that we are doing, because the passion is there, but it's not just passion. It's passion that is backed by skill set. It's passion that is backed by 2 or 3 degrees at a time, right? Because young people are here not just bringing the passion to the table, but we're also bringing the knowledge and the skill set and the expertise. So what we need is the resources to continue with this work. What is needed is also spaces where young people are not just tokens, but are actual decision makers. So we are not just there to deliver the statement, or we are not just there for the photo op, but we are there to actually work on policy. We are there to actually drive change. We are there to actually bring our skill sets to the table. And in my sphere in nuclear disarmament, one thing that I did, we saw the lack of youth participation in the process. lack of African youth participation specifically in nuclear weapons process. But before that, just more generally youth involvement. Young people had been part of the process of the negotiation and the writing of the treaty, but we had seen a bit of a lack of it at some stage. And what we did therefore was become the bridge, because some of us are fortunate enough to be in this space. And so I think it's very important that we give back and we uplift those that are trying to get into the space through mentorships. And I love what Cairo mentioned about coaching as well, and Sofia about intergenerational dialogue. I think those are very, very important because the mentorship is so much needed, and there's certain things that you can learn on less experience, right? And in those moments and in those instances, that's where we need that intergenerational kind of dialogue in those moments. But that should not stifle our capability and our knowledge and our skill set, because we are also very creative and we are also very knowledgeable in the work that we are doing. So I'd say, yeah, definitely funding to keep up with the work that we are doing, but also just accessibility to spaces and to moments.
Wow, you're obviously very passionate about this, Venessa, and it definitely comes across. I 100% agree. Definitely, yes. You touched on my sort of closing remarks that we don't just need a sort of a ceremonial seat at the table, but we do the work. And our voices need to be heard. Who wants to add in? Sofia, Cairo?
I'm happy to chime in. Yes, and I completely agree. One thing I will say, I'll start off by saying that there are incredible organizations who are doing the work of, upskilling and providing opportunities to youth. Charter for Compassion, of course, being one of them. And there's also a foundation that I've been working with recently. I'm a board member for the Ishmael Bind Taylor Kamara Foundation, IBTK Foundation, which is led by the visionary Hawa Taylor Kamara Diallo, who recently retired from the United Nations after 30 years of service. That's another foundation that's providing great resources to youth in Sierra Leone and beyond. But just to emphasize what Venessa was saying, young people we do not need to feel empowered. We actually need to be empowered. And so, that requires visible, tangible support from the intergenerational perspective as well as within institutions. Something that I thought was really profound, that one of my co-leads of Together for SDGs, his name is Peter Mondi, he's from the Global Youth Forum. He had emphasized that passion alone cannot fund projects and programs sustainably. Youth-led programs need dedicated funding. They need resources. So we're not just talking about empowering youth, we're talking about investing in youth, and that is non-negotiable. Some tangible areas that I do think that would be helpful from an intergovernmental context is that we really do need to reshape how the UN and intergovernmental organizations operate. So for example, the 2024 UN Civil Society Conference in Nairobi, it was historic, being the first time held in the Global South and on the African continent. But conferences alone don't create change. This is part of the reason why we founded Together for SDGs after the UN Civil Society Conference in Nairobi, to continue our youth-led intergenerational advocacy mandate, because that kind of follow through is what transforms dialogue into action. So at the end of the day, empowerment requires infrastructure, it requires resources, it requires the community who is willing to step back and let young people lead. And these systems have to be designed to support youth and not just talk about them, just as Venessa had shared.
Again, 100% agreed, and it's really well put. We need these systems in place to let us build the peace that we want to build, instead of rules and regulations and sort of, no, we've done that, don't try it, and have these restrictions on us. 100% agreed. Yes, definitely. Sofia?
I agree. I think I found it really interesting what Venessa was saying, because sorry, this suddenly went really loud. I found really interesting what Venessa was saying, because I think we need to train young people. One of the biggest fear that I had when I was getting into all of this was being underqualified. Yes, I was studying at university, but at the same time, university didn't give me the skills to do a job in, for example, project management. And so that's why I really appreciate these conferences and Charter for Compassion, because these workshops for building capacity, workshops for learning how to use Excel. Not gonna lie, this is really important. Workshops on how to start your own program. What are the legal the requirements that you need to fill out? What are the financial requirements that you need to fill out for a project to be successful? How can you do best fundraising? And these kind of skill sets are what will bring all of the people that I know that have great ideas and just don't know where to start, from having the idea to actually being change makers in that sense. So I feel like I really want to support those organizations, as Cairo was saying, that are already out there, that are already doing the work of providing young people with skills that they will be able to use in this specific set. And also, I think I wanted to share a personal story. When I started working for the organization, I was, of course, at the very basic level and doing a lot of Excel and a lot of programming for the events that my organization was organizing for community building. And what I think was so great was my boss bringing me to meet with the people that we were helping. And I think it was so nice for me to meet someone and realize that my 10 hours on Excel trying to make the program go well affected these people, and they felt like they could get out of the house and get through the day and felt connected. And so I felt, even at the lowest, ranking that I had, I was doing something that was really meaningful. So we need to maybe also help young people to see the effects that they have and give them the skills to do so.
That's very important, to have people believe in the youth and to give them the freedom to do their projects. And as you said, Sofia, even at this sort of project management level, or just still that one step, that first step, it might not seem big, but it's very important. It's the most important step that you can take, and we definitely need that support system, that belief, the funding, the resources around us to help us with that first step. So they're all very valid, very important points. Especially definitely very important to the youth sitting and listening to us right now. And that leads us to our last question, which is the youth. We're not just joining the peace building movement, but we're creating a new movement. We're reimagining it. So how can youth-led movements today reimagine peace-building ways that go beyond traditional diplomacy, making it more inclusive and more compassionate? Cairo, let's begin with you.
Absolutely. Well, one thing that I will say that is missing in traditional diplomacy that really could be honed in on is listening, real listening, not listening to respond, but listening to understand. And then this is super crucial, which is acting on what you hear. One thing that I wanted to share, and I also have some slides I wanted to briefly reference. Hold on one moment. Because one thing that we did within Together for SDGs that I'm really proud of is, hold on. Okay. Let's see. Can everyone see my screen? Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Okay. So one thing that I'm really proud of us being able to do is we incorporated youth design research practices, including something called the Building Communities and Action Framework. It has 4 phases, and I'm going to go through it really quickly, but you can see those are my 2 co-leads, Peter Mondi and Dr. Kristen Bodiford. We came together after the 2024 UN Civil Society Conference in Nairobi, and we've created an intergenerational initiative. This is the Building Communities and Action Framework. I wanted to point this out. It has 4 different phases, from framing questions to designing those questions, enacting, and reflecting. But what's so important is the way that this framework is integrated into any initiative in terms of pre-planning. You're able to have a more inclusive perspective, making sure that the solutions that are being created for the community are being proposed or supported by the community as well. I'm happy to share more information about this, but I did want to provide this as a context. This is another way of looking at, when building out initiatives, when creating projects, another way of making sure that you are incorporating an inclusive and holistic approach to the solutions that we're creating. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Cairo. You've already got a ready-made framework built for us, for people to have that new, reimagine that new piece of what the youth want it to look like. And that's so amazing. You've got a head start on us.
Happy to share after.
Sofia, Venessa, what would you like to add? We've only got a few minutes left, unfortunately. It went by so quickly, and I've thoroughly enjoyed myself.
I think I'll leave the floor to Vanessa, but I just wanted to say that I consider myself youth, and I'm still really young. But at the same time, I think I'm already ready to give the space to the young than me, because I think they have a lot more digital skills than I do, and another view of the world. Even if it's hasn't been long in this life, I have already adapted to the systems, and I've already absorbed what the system should be and the rules and such and such. And I think the power of the youth is not being used to that and being like, that sounds a bit wrong. So yeah, I think I'll be there, I'll be in the movement, but I'm also ready to see what are the younger generations being like, we should change that and follow.
No, thank you so much, Cairo, Sofia, and Atma for what you shared. I, again, super resonate and agree with everything that's been shared. I think the only other addition I'll add is that normal traditional diplomatic spaces don't tend to be very kind to young people because of the approach that we bring. And an approach that is rooted in one thing that we mentioned, which is the key word for this panel today, which is compassion, right? An approach that centers in intersection, an approach that centers in bringing to the forefront, again, the grassroots communities and the affected communities. However, the beautiful thing that I've seen is that we are still disrupting these diplomatic spaces. And in disarmament, in my own little space, in my own little bubble, one thing that we have done is we have founded and created youth organizations that aim at breaking these diplomatic spaces. And we do so not just by being there to, do word of mouth or pay lip service to youth involvement or just be there to show face, but in actually writing the policies, in actually engaging with the government, and in actually driving the change that we want to see. And so I think young people are changing the space. Young people are driving the new diplomatic space, and I'm very optimistic about the future. As we have mentioned here, the times are bleak, the times aren't the best. But I love what Sofia says about passing it onto the next generations, the ones that are coming after us. So just our peers, right? Those of us that are not involved in this sector, and just getting them to be involved in the work that we do and getting them to also join in the advocacy for a better world.
This was supposed to be a theoretical question, but as all three of you have proved, it's not theoretical. It's happening now. You guys are changing the framework. You guys are sort of asking the important questions and making those changes so you can leave a better legacy for the next generation that hopefully will be kinder to, and we won't question them as much, and we'll let them run with what they want to do. So, I mean, it's amazing the work that all three of you are doing. And I think with that, we're back home, so we're done with the panel. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your experiences and the amazing work that you guys are doing. Sofia, thank you for sharing about your intergenerational project. Cairo, thank you so much for sharing that framework. I'm sure a lot of people are going to get use out of it. And Venessa, thank you so much for sharing about how important it is about building those resources for the upcoming youth who are going to be me and you one day, and sort of help to take this movement even sort of forward, and much more sort of forward than we could ever take it. And that's the goal, right? To have a peaceful, just world at the end, and to leave it that much more compassionate and better for everyone than we have experienced or we could. So thank you again so much for your time and for joining us today. Thank you to everyone in the audience for joining us, and I hope you guys had as much fun and enjoyment as I certainly did. Thank you so much to the Charter for putting this all together, and thank you so much, as I said before, it's not just a ceremonial seat, but an actual value to our voices, and thank you for actually listening to us. Again, the conversation doesn't end here. The conference is still ongoing. I hope you guys make the most of the opportunities that you're getting to network and to learn. I certainly am learning a lot from you all. Thank you again to Venessa, Cairo, and Sofia. I'm sorry Abdul wasn't able to join us. And just thank you, and keep choosing compassion. Thank you.
And a huge thank you to our Atma for a fantastic job in creating this space for us as well. So great job to you, Atma.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.